Hey, teachers and friends. Danny Hogger here, the writer, author, and penner. I know, writer sounded wrong first, so I corrected it to author. I'm talking about A Broadcaster's Secrets to Teaching, and it's about calling out yourself sometimes when you make mistakes. It's okay. And there's so many other lessons that I learned from radio and broadcasting that I think can help you in the way you present your learning in your classroom. Head over to ampedup.learning.com. Use the promo code HoggerHistory10. Save 10% on that sweet little PDF, and I marked it down at a special price just for ampedup.learning.com friends. They are a wonderful company. It's owned by 2 teachers in Texas. They want teachers to be able to share lessons that are engaging, and for buyers, customers, teachers like yourself to find new engaging resources to help in English or social studies or math, to help embolden what you are doing. There's a ton of great stuff there, and teachers benefit. What better way is it than that to do business? Anyway, I love it. AmpedUpLearning.com, promo code HoggerHistory10. They've got great merch and social media giveaways too. Check them out. Today on the show, it's Marissa Thompson. She is a pioneer. She has done so many things to unlock the way teachers and students interact and encourage teachers with her fascinating words. She talks about creative seating, interaction, activities for elementary school, adapting them to harness the power of creativity in order to unlock learning at a greater rate than before. Marissa Thompson, it's a wonderful episode. You're going to love it. Here it is right now on Inspiring Teachers. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. My new album, Limelight, is coming out very soon this January, so please check that out and support my independent music. And right now, let's get on with Inspiring Teachers. Let's do this.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers, a show bringing you classroom tips, motivation, and stories from successful educators. Join Tavis Beam and Danny Hogger as they explore the why of teaching.
Hey everybody, Danny Hogger here for Inspiring Teachers. Tavis Beam's on special assignment getting his woodshop ready for a brand new series of projects, and he's making all sorts of amazing things. I'm just glad I don't have any sharp objects or bandsaws near me. Just the ideas of history are enough. But that's a very thoughtful thing that could work in a lot of different ways. But today, what we're talking about is unlocking student potential and removing temporary obstacles to teaching with Marissa Thompson, who pioneers a perspective that our limitations are only temporary and just writes about some amazing things. I know has a recent blog that she wants to talk about getting students to provide feedback and find their potential in the classroom. You can follow her on Twitter at Marissa E. Thompson. And Marissa, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Danny.
Oh, no, it's really great. We were just having a little pre-chatter about Fridays and getting feedback from students. And in the classroom right now, I'm working on a government project, an election project, where I'm going to have students prepare stump speeches and find their values and watch some speeches from multiple parties, and not just the Republican Democratic parties, but let's look at some of the independent parties. What are some of the ideas that they have? What's challenging about having different ideas? And we're a very open classroom in that way. We're really respectful of each other's beliefs. Most days I find myself saying if the whole country and world could run like our class, we'd be in good shape. We've got a lot of open-minded students, and that makes me hopeful for the future. And you were mentioning that you've recently written a new blog about a recent time when students were giving you feedback in an assignment. Can you tell us a little bit about that before we dive into your history and everything that you've created?
Yeah, so for the past 2 weeks, my students have actually been looking. It's interesting. I think our epiphanies have been the same.
Mm-hmm.
My students have been looking at 2018 for the last 2 weeks and looking at things on a personal, local, national, global level by months and really getting kind of a feel for what 2018 really looked like. And what they did was they synthesized that information. They brought it down to a thematic idea, because of course, English language arts, right? And they decided on a word or a theme, a thematic idea that they want to leave behind in 2018. And a word that they would like for the world to guide us in 2019.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, it's neat. So they get to reflect and they get to see that there was a lot happened last year. And
Mm-hmm.
Often we focus only on the bad. And they got to look at a lot of the good things that happened too, or look at it and say, we really need to act more. We need to act. And so they are making some videos similar to Google's year in search.
Okay.
And then they've made a Canva poster, kind of like a film poster with a QR code and a bit.ly at the bottom, so that we'll frame them and put them down in the hall so that other students can see it. But it's a persuasive visual time capsule of 2018.
Wow, that's a really great idea. I love it as a writing prompt too, just a thinking prompt. So I want to have that in my classroom. I'll let you know how that goes. That's really wonderful. And they take it a step further. I think that's one of the things that you write about a lot and that you have tweeted about a lot too, is taking projects from an idea and from a nice minute conversation and expanding it to something that is meaningful to students in their lives. So that's very, very cool. Can you tell us about how you came to education? Because I know you've had a lot of different successes in many areas. And what was it that led you down the path to becoming a teacher in the first place?
Well, I think a lot of people think they know what they're going to be when they grow up. I was going to be a marine biologist, and clearly that worked out really well. And I changed my major several times, and then I was going to go into elementary school. And when I tell my current students that, because I teach secondary, I tell my students, and they bust out laughing, and they're like, "That's a really bad idea." I'm like, "I know, awful idea. I should not be there." And God bless our elementary school teachers and our middle school teachers, and
Absolutely.
right? And they say the same thing about secondary.
They really do. It's always a funny conversation.
Yeah, I love it. I'm like, great, you stay there. Do what you're doing, because I like what I'm doing up here, and you were getting them all set up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know that I wanted to be a teacher. I think maybe subconsciously I did. And then looking back now as an adult, I didn't know it at the time, but my mom had taught before I was born. And my grandmother was actually superintendent of a school district. And my great-grandmother was a one-room schoolhouse teacher. So I guess I'm in the family business.
That's impressive.
Yeah, when I got my teaching credential, they actually framed her diploma.
How sweet.
Her teaching credential, yeah. But it didn't dawn on me that I wanted to be a teacher until I had one of those professors that it's either one or the other. Either they're extremely inspiring or they move you to action. And after I got kicked out of his class, I had raised yes,
I didn't think that's where we were going. I didn't know which one of these teachers we were talking about. I thought we were going down one path, and
no,
in the road there, the other way, yeah.
I remember raising my hand to ask a question, and he told me to put my hand down. I already know what you're going to say. Put your hand down. And I remember being pretty taken aback by that, and not all that appreciative of it. And so I raised my hand again, and I was
as one would be when told to be silent in that way.
Hey, actually, I do have something to say, and
right.
Paying this education and whatever. So, driving home that day, I really do remember a moment where I thought, that's not how it's supposed to be, and I think it was a catalyst for me.
Interesting. Yeah. That's a cool story. I like moments like that. I don't think I've told this one on the series so far. When I was a student at Dominican University in Marin County, there was a speech 101 class, and I was interested in that speech class. And a student actually had the moment for me where she went up and thought she was going to be really, really clever and smart. And for her informative speech, she had 15 minutes on how to prepare a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And so she took the bread out in one hand and the peanut butter and the jelly, and she's doing it all in the air. It takes about 30 seconds, and she puts her hands together, and she says, and that's how you do it. And my teacher was not amused at all. A couple students were laughing. The rest were just quiet because we're new to college, but I think we all knew we were trying to raise our level of academic performance. At least we weren't going to lower it to that standard. And the teacher said, you have 14 minutes and 30 seconds, and you'll be using all of it. And so I think most of us would go to just maybe tell a story or fill the time when she found out she was serious. She didn't. What she chose to do was repeat the story slower, and then about 6 or 7 times. So about minute 4 of that, my brain starts to want to take a vacation, and pull like a parachute and eject out. So I turned my piece of paper over and I figured out $43,000 plus $10,000 housing divided by 2 semesters. I'm not a big math student, but your brain is somewhere when it's trying to do math to have fun. So basically I'm calculating, and I found out that speech was $472 to listen to. And then I pulled out of school right after class.
You'll never forget how to make a peanut butter and jelly.
No, I've never messed it up. So there was good out of that story. And then from there I ended up in Fullerton. So and that I credit to a lot of my getting out of my bubble and developing. So it's funny how life comes down to small moments, even though I don't know that we mean them to, but it did for you and it did for me. And now we're sitting in secondary education, which is really neat. What are some of the things that you love about your job and coming in and interacting with your students?
You know, going to those small moments, that one of my students, when I was a student teacher, had stayed after class to get some help, and we were laughing about something. I had a slip of the tongue, like a Freudian slip, something.
Mm-hmm.
I started busting out laughing, and he was laughing, and I'm so sorry. I'm sure it was something that was not completely appropriate.
Okay, sure.
We were laughing,
Mm-hmm.
and we stopped for a second, and he said, you know, we would respect you more if you were yourself in class.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I kind of swallowed and I said, I don't think that's true. And he said, I think you're playing teacher.
Ooh, wow.
And he was dead on. And I was. And I'm so thankful. I haven't been able to find him since leaving student teaching, but I'm so thankful that he said that, because in my classroom, I get to make the environment that allows me to be comfortable. And I think that allows my students to be comfortable. And we actually have a really good time. And we discuss, like in your classroom, we discuss very real things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a ton of trust. And
Definitely.
it's really a special place. And it feels like that when I come in. And I tell my students all the time, I actually bake brownies for the counselors, or like give them treats, and that's why they give me all the good kids, you know.
Oh, that's a funny thing. I like that.
Right? And they're like, do you really? I was like, well, I do.
That's, oh my gosh.
They don't actually like just start. No, you know, all the kids are good kids. And I think it's more fun when we are ourselves. And I think it's more fun when we let the students be themselves in all of their glory, you know, and
For sure.
share their ideas. And I mean, I will look around every once in a while, be next to a kid, and they'll be discussing a novel or doing a project like this, and I'll kind of, you know, bonk the kid with my elbow and go, they pay me to do this.
That's so cool. I love those moments.
Yeah. And so I think it's a really special place, and I just can't imagine not being in it, even though I had considered leaving after about 7 years.
And what was that transitional moment that brought you back from that point and not leaving?
It was gradual, but I started using my students' ideas. I started running with it.
Oh, yeah.
Anything that they kind of, well, wouldn't it be fun if we could do that? And I would, why don't we, you know? And I started using those ideas, and we started having a lot of fun. And I realized that they were learning a lot while we were having fun.
Of course.
And I didn't need to have the assessments or the style. I didn't need to play teacher like my students said. I didn't need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So I assess them quite differently now than I used to. I've gotten rid of study questions. We just sit around and talk about the book and analyze it, and I have my little sheet and I do the whole thing, but it doesn't need to be the way that I was doing it, or the way that I was taught, or the way that I went to school. It doesn't need to be that way. So it was gradual. And then once I started getting some success with those ideas, I started running with them. Absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
No, it's really important. And those relationships that you build with those little moments make a classroom where you eliminate all sense of that we're opponents, or that in any way we're not working towards the same goal. And with history, there's an infinite amount of pockets that you could dive into of wisdom and knowledge. And I have no problem telling them that, if it's World War II, we could teach a whole year on it and we won't cover everything. And you could learn about something and teach everyone else. So we've been doing 45 minutes of traditional lecture, and I'm bringing in photos and multimedia and journals from people who are involved in many different sides. And then I said, well, there's something that I'm not showing you that you want to know. For some of you, it's like battles or strategy. And I'm not a military strategist. I tell them, I have no war experience, actually. Also wasn't alive. So I'm going to do my best to try to act like I was and give you this. And then so it's like, why don't you choose a topic that's relevant, dive deep and research, find good sources and learn. And then show us, and we'll all learn, and we'll all learn together, and it'll be wonderful. And I'm learning every day from the things that they find, and we're helping search together, just like you said with talking to them. Well, what did you think was interesting about this? Oh, really? Okay. Well, what is it about that that's interesting?
Right.
And when you start to do that, well, now we're collaborating. It's like we're all finding together, and that's really cool. I like that. And I like that one of the things you talk about is removing the obstacles that we feel like are there in front of us. So this morning, I played a clip from 60 Minutes that was last Sunday about an architect here in the Bay Area who lost his sight 10 years ago, and he's been designing buildings blind, and he found a way to print out embossed paper and find plans. And I'm like, so let me ask you a question. When's the last time you guys quit something or stopped doing something because it was hard? Okay. Imagine if you lost your sight and you were an architect, and he not only did he not quit, but he's still designing amazing buildings in Oakland and San Francisco, and he's changing the course of architecture history and the history of like how ADA compliant our buildings are in the state of California. And I said, so what is it that you think you can't do again? and I don't just tell them like, why don't you do this? But I tell them stories about myself too, like imperfections or times when I embarrassed myself in high school by not trying hard enough. And I think they can learn from that. And they don't need to see me, like you said earlier, as playing teacher or some perfect person. I'm not.
Right. Right.
But we can all kind of make each other better. And I like that you talk about that kind of as a frequent theme, that we make these huge obstacles. And when did you start realizing that that was something they needed to hear? Was it right away, or is it something that you found over time?
It's something I found over time, and I actually stumbled on it. I don't want to say I yelled it at a student, but I was so compelled in what I was saying. We had been reading East of Eden, and there's this beautiful chapter about Tim Schull. And if you haven't read it, it's a little difficult to understand, but basically it's your choices are your life, and you have the power, the absolute power, to make any choice that you want at any time that you want. So I started talking to him about it's your responsibility, your life. What you do with your life is entirely up to you. You can do anything. And a student came back and said, well, within reason. And I was like, no, without reason. He's like, well,
that's nice.
okay, within limits. And I said, no. And I'm so frustrated. I'm like sitting here going, you are 15 years old. You can do anything. You can do anything. You really can. And I called out to him. Said, the only limits in your life are the ones that we set or the ones that you accept from other people. And
yes.
And I was like, yeah, I like that, you know? And I started thinking,
that's great.
I think it is really true. And I think it's especially true of education.
I love it. It's very motivational and inspiring. And if we all spoke to each other more like that, if we heard messages like that more in our community, this one's not mine or yours. It's a historical quote, and I'm always have trouble attributing who it was.
Right.
And then when I start like digressing like that, sometimes I lose what I was about to say. And I think that just happened. But it was something about, if we all knew what you could achieve, what would you try today? If you knew that you might not fail, like what would you go for?
Right. If you knew you couldn't fail, what would you?
That's it. See, I should have asked you first. Do you know who it was?
You're good. It's like whenever I teach the kids, Shakespeare said that he did not. That's not.
The other day I said, with great power comes great opportunity. I was like, is that Star Wars? They're like, no, that's Spider-Man. And I'm like, oh,
Yoda.
All right. Yeah.
I think so. I think we do get in our way. I think a lot of times we complain about the things that we ourselves create. And I think as soon as we realize we're the ones that created it, I think there's also that responsibility and we can change it. And I mean it sincerely. Sometimes it's hard to do a huge change at a site, but I've been able to do lots of changes. And as soon as I started getting momentum, the fear of trying things really went away.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like being really explicit with my students. So I say, hey, look, I'm going to try this. It could totally bomb, but are you with me? Or are you not? Where are we? And they always, yeah, let's try it. And so, okay, great. So, and we roll with it. But I also think that it's really special that I'm sitting in, if you can, I don't know if you can see my room, but
yes, we can.
I'm sitting in a student's idea. We made this together. There were 80 students that instead of writing a traditional research paper, we actually researched the effect of environments on efficiency and productivity and how people feel. And so this became it turned into a PBL project, but we wrote a grant and we wrote it together. So instead of writing individual papers, we all worked together to write a grant. We totally lost, and no problem, but we decided just to keep going. So
Cool. That's
yeah,
cool. That, that might even be better.
I think it's a better, instead of having somebody send us all the stuff that we wanted, okay, we wrote our paper, well, now we have to actually do it. So do you believe what we're kind of saying here with there aren't any limits? They didn't give it to us, so what, we just quit?
Mm-hmm.
And instead we just kept going. So little by little, we started making this happen. And whenever a student feels like, well, we can't really do that, I remind them that you're sitting in it. You're sitting in somebody else's idea.
That's so great, man. What a wonderful lesson. Thanks for sharing. And I'm glad you got to show us that environment too. It's powerful.
Yeah, it's neat. It's a good reminder too. Whenever it feels like something's really impossible, I'm here. It looks like this for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's wonderful. What advice, or I have just two quick final questions because you've given us a lot. Maybe we can talk more about a specific subject in the future. You're always sharing really great stuff. So I want to let people know that they should follow you on Twitter at Marissa E. Thompson and go to unlimitedteacher.com, find out more about what you're doing. But if it's the end of the year and the end of the term, like what would you want your students to walk away with having learned from you besides the things that you teach them that are curriculum standards?
You know, their final last year was to analyze our class and to analyze the course. So when I asked them that, you know, what will you take with you? What will you walk away with? I didn't expect their answer. And all 4 classes said that they learned that they can. And they said that they're going to walk away with confidence. And I love that. I don't think I could ask for anything better.
That's huge.
Right? The ability to feel confident about going forward with an idea, that's great. That's better than
fantastic.
That's better than vocabulary. That's better than anything, but they feel confident to be able to share an idea and to start to see it through and go through the steps of seeing it through. It was like Christmas Day, right? Teacher Christmas.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect. I think that's a great place to end on, actually. You answered 2 questions in one. So there you go. Double credit for you. Marissa, thanks so much for joining us on Inspiring Teachers and for doing everything you have for your classroom. And hopefully we can talk again about a specific area of focus, maybe have a small panel at some point. And thanks for doing everything that you do. Absolutely. This is Danny Hogger. And for Tavis Beam, we thank you for listening and watching our show. We're having quite a lot of fun on Twitter as well at Show Teachers. And if you want to subscribe on YouTube or iTunes, we'll be there. Otherwise, class is dismissed and we'll see you next time.